Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I'm going to show you a couple of different floral cards. We're going to be doing a slimline card and an A2 size card. So let's go ahead and get started. So today I'm really excited to show you this beautiful stencil set. This is from Pinkfresh Studios and this is called the Garden Florals. And you get 5 stencils in this set. So you're going to be layering up all 5 of these stencils. Now each stencil has a marking in the upper left hand corner, and on the 4 corners there's little alignment marks as well. We won't be using those today, but those would help you center it on your card. So here in the upper left hand corner you'll see where it says the stencil number. That's number 2. And then there you can see that's stencil number 1. I know it's difficult to see, but they are labeled. So you'll want to put those in order 1 through 5. Now I've got some Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm going to tape that down with a little bit of tape from my Tombow tape runner. And I am going to move this paper out a little bit. It's a little too close. I want it to be centered on my cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this out. And that was still a little bit too far, so I'm actually going to put it at that first grid line and all the way down at the bottom of my card. And then I'll place the stencil all the way in the right hand corner of my Misty. So now I've got Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn, and I'm going to be using my little foam daubers to do the coloring. So this will just make it really easy to stay in these smaller areas as well. So I'm starting with the Twisted Citron, and I'm going to place that on all the openings on this layer of the stencil. Then we'll be using that darker shade to do some more foliage a little bit later on. So now the stencil number 2 has these 2 larger flowers on it. So I'm going to do those in the pink tones, and I'm going to be using Kitsch Flamingo and Picked Raspberry. And again, the stencil is down in the bottom right hand corner of the Misty. And these are the Distress Oxide ink pads that I'm using. You could use any inks here that you want. I just find that these blend so nicely. They're really easy to blend and add color to. So I'm just going to add that first layer of the Kitsch Flamingo. Then I'll take stencil number 3, and I'm going to do those 2 smaller flowers. And I'll do those in some yellow tones. So I'm using Mustard Seed and Ripe Persimmon. We're going to start with the mustard seed here. And now I'll grab that next stencil. Again, just checking up in the upper left hand corner that it's the correct stencil. And then I'm going to do the highlighting or the shadowing for the inside of the flowers here. So I'm using that Picked Raspberry, and I'm going to add that center to the flower, and you're going to see how beautiful this comes out. And then for those yellow flowers, I'm going to that Ripe Persimmon and add the center with that. So you can start to see this is really coming together. And then with my last stencil, number 5, again lining it up in the right hand corner of my Misty. And you want to make sure you line these up the exact same way each time. I'm adding the Mowed Lawn. Now those little centers, the very center of those flowers, I'm going to be adding one more color, and I'm going to use the Aged Mahogany to add that little center to those flowers. So you can see how beautiful this is. I'm going to set this aside to dry, and we'll make a card out of this a little bit later. So let's go to the second panel that we're going to create. I'm using the Lawn Fawn dies, and I've gone ahead and die cut that from the small Slimline with Lift the Flaps, and that's going to give a beautiful stitched edge all the way around. And I die cut that from the Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100 pound cardstock. And what I want to show you here is how you can create a beautiful border. This would be really great on a scrapbook page, and I just want to show you how easy it is to line this up and go across the cardstock. So we're going to create a slimline card, and what I want to do is try to figure out about where that stencil is going to be. And I'm kind of looking at this flower here. I want that flower to be towards the top of this panel, that larger one up at the top. So I'm going to use this one as my guide for where I need to start. So I'm placing it in my MISTI. I've got my cardstock up along the right hand side of my MISTI, and I've got my stencil all the way to the left hand corner there. So I want stencil number 1 first, and I'm going to grab that and place some magnets down. So again, I've got that stencil all the way to the left here, and I'm going to do that same process, adding my layers of color. And you can see that I don't have to do the whole stencil here, so this is going to go very quickly. So I've got stencil number 2, and I'm going to slide that all the way in the left-hand corner again. And then I'm going to add my Kitsch Flamingo. Stencil 3, again in that left-hand corner. And I'm adding the mustard seed. So the same color combination we used before, I just want to show you how completely different it looks when you do a long panel. And again, I think this would be fantastic for a scrapbook page. For the bottom of a page, it would be absolutely gorgeous. For a wedding or a shower or just about anything, just a garden picture. If you had some garden pictures, this would be gorgeous. So I added the picked raspberry. Now I'm adding the ripe persimmon. And then I'll go back to that last stencil, number 5, and I'll add some mowed lawn, just like we did before. So I just wanted to, again, show you how versatile these stencils are. You don't have to use it just one way. You can kind of adapt this to other things if you want to. Now, you see that that pattern is complete, and you could leave this card just like that and put a sentiment off to the right hand side there, which would be absolutely gorgeous. But I did want to show you how I line this up. So now I want to do a second section. So again, I'm looking at the flowers and the leaves to see where everything's going to be. And I know that I need it down at the bottom of the MISTI again, just like we did before. And I'm going to go ahead and stencil the next section here. Again, down at the bottom, and 2 grid lines in from the left. So you do want to make sure you keep track of that. You can write it down or mark it with a pencil there or a little bit of tape. But I'm 2 grid lines in from the left there. You can see that there. And then I'm lining it up right at the bottom of the MISTI. So this is really easy to do. Again, those 2 grid lines, and I'll continue this pattern. And this is very fun. I have to say, I found this really relaxing. I could have done this all day. This was just really a joy to do. And like I said, my mind is racing because I can just think of so many different things you could do with this. This would be great for little gift bags, boxes. I just think this is so much fun. So now I've got the second part of my florals. Now I want to do that right hand section there. So I'm going to have to figure out about where this needs to be. So you will have to play around a little bit here. And I'm going back to those flowers just to see where those flowers are going to line up with this section here. So I decided it'd be easier if I just put the stencil all the way in the right hand corner. Then I don't have to remember how many grid lines I was away from the side there. So I'm just going to position my panel back down to my MISTI once I determine where that is. And you'll see that the cardstock does hang over the MISTI a little bit there on the left, but it's no harm. It'll be fine. The lid will still close and it won't do any damage to your cardstock there. So I'll place those magnets back in place, and I can go ahead and finish up my stenciling here. So I'm going to start with stencil number 1. Now that I know where that positioning is, I just used the flowers to determine where I wanted to position this. So I've got the stencil in the bottom right hand corner, and I went ahead and did my stenciling. Now this little section here I noticed was a little bit bare there, so I'm going to just do the same thing, only this time I'm going to have the cardstock hang off the right hand side of the MISTI, and I'll have that stencil right up against that left hand corner again. And then I'll just quickly fill in that little area there, and there's not too much to that. So look at how beautiful this is. I just absolutely love this. So now that we have those two panels, let's go ahead and make some cards out of these. I'm using for my sentiment the Tim Holtz Sizzix Thinlits, and I'm going to be using the Happy Birthday. And this is the Celebration Words Script die set. So I've grabbed the Happy Birthday, and I'm going to die cut that out of some black 100-pound cardstock. And I'll die cut each of these words 3 times. And then I'm going to layer these up. I'm using my Nuvo glue pen. And I'm just pressing, you just press the tip down to release a little bit of the glue, and this goes on really easily. It's not thick, it goes on very thin, and it dries clear. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to layer up these dies. I'll just stack these up, and you see that will give us a nice thick embellishment here. I'm going to do the same thing for the Happy. Now I've got a piece of black cardstock 8 1/4 by 3 1/4 inches. And that'll be the mat for our card. And then with my large Slimline with sliders die and my Hero Hues premium cardstock in the Canary, I'm going to go ahead and die cut this panel. Now if your machine won't take the length of this die, that's okay. Just die cut it on one side and then turn it around and die cut again. Just make sure that it didn't move at all, that you have it lined right back up, and you can run that through again and you'll get a perfect die cut. So now that's the layer for behind the black cardstock, so I'm going to go ahead and glue those together. Now for my Slimline card, I've got a piece of cardstock 8 1/2 by 7 inches, and I'm scoring that at 3 1/2 inches. So this card will measure 3 1/2 by 8 1/2. Now again, I can go ahead and add that to the front of my card. So I went ahead and glued those two together. Now using my T ruler, just to line up my sentiment, this just makes it a lot easier to line this up. I'm going to go ahead and just position these in place. Then I'm going back to that same Nuvo glue, and I'm going to add that to the back here. And then using that T ruler, I'm just going to figure out where that should be, and also make sure that it's in a nice straight line. So I'm just pressing that down with a little bit of scrap paper, and then I'll do the same thing for the Happy. So just take a little time there to make sure those are lined up straight as best you can. And then again, I'm going to add the dot on the eye. I'm using the Nuvo Deluxe adhesive here. It's a little bit thicker adhesive, and I'm just going to layer up those 3 little dots so that they're at the same level as the sentiment. Now with my Hero Hues enamel dots, I'm going to add some of these yellow ones to the background here, and I added quite a few. It took me a little while to decide where I wanted them, but you can see those there, and they add a lot of interest to the card as well. Now I'm going to add some glitter and sparkle using my Nuvo glitter gloss pen. And I'll go right over the tops of these letters. And that's just going to make these really pop out and just add a little sparkle to these. Now you could have used some glitter paper here as well, but I find just adding this sparkle is really easy to do and just, again, gives it a little bit more interest. So hopefully you can see that sparkle that we have there on those letters. And I'll show you this card again up close at the end of the video. Now with my infinity dies from Hero Arts, I'm going to go ahead and take that largest one. And these are the nesting oval infinity dies. I'm going to go ahead and die cut this. I just want to line it up with the stenciled area here. And I'll run that through the die cutting machine. Now using my Salvaged Patina Distress Oxide ink and my little sponge dauber, I'm going to go all the way around the edges of this. I'm just going to create just kind of a little halo all the way around the edges. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of a darker shadow. Just take that white edge away from the sides of that panel. Now with the Hero Arts fancy dies, I'm going to die cut. This is the Woodgrain fancy die. I'm going to go ahead and die cut some Hero Hues premium cardstock in the Paradise color. And I'm placing this on an angle to run it through my die cutting machine because it is a very solid die. So it'll make it a lot easier to run it through. But you can see that when it die cuts that wood grain, it does make a few little gaps there. So we'll adjust for that later. Now with my Arctic cardstock in the 100-pound weight, again from Hero Arts, I've got a piece that measures 4¼ by 11 inches, and I'm scoring that at 5½ inches. So I'm making a standard A2 top folding card, which will measure 4¼ by 5½. So to make sure that those little pieces that die cut all the way through don't pop up, I'm adding my ATG 700 tape to the entire front of the card, just to make sure that lays nice and flat. I'm just lining that up and taping that down. So now I'll go ahead and heat set this panel and make sure it's nice and dry. And now I can go back to that Salvaged Patina, and I'm going to add just a little bit of ink all the way around the edges of the front of my card. Once that was done, I'm placing my panel in my Misty, and for my sentiment, I'm using Happy Birthday. And these are the big words Happy set. This is from Stampendous. So I'm going to line up the Happy, and I want to make sure I have a nice solid image because we're going to be doing some embossing. So I want to make sure I use my anti-static powder tool. And again, make sure that ink is nice and dry so that none of our embossing powder sticks. And then I've not used this stamp before, so I'm just quickly prepping it just by rubbing my hand across it a few times, just taking away some of that film off the top of it. So with my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, I'm going to stamp this 3 times. I want to make sure I have a nice thick layer of black ink. Now this ink does dry pretty quickly, so you do want to make sure you move, pretty quickly here because we are going to emboss it. And so you want to make sure you don't wait too long. You want to get your embossing powder on there right away. So I'll make sure it's nice and wet by adding these 3 layers of ink, and it'll also be a nice dark jet black as well. So once I have that stamped, I'm quickly bringing in the clear embossing powder, and I'm going to go ahead and emboss this. So I'm sprinkling on the embossing powder and just going to tap away any excess there. And if you do see any excess powder, you can always take your brush. I'm using my Nuvo Surface Sweep brush and just brush away any excess that you might see there. I don't think there was any, but I just did that just to be sure. Now I'll take my heat tool and I'll go ahead and emboss this. And you can see how beautifully this embosses. You get this nice dark black crisp image here. And you can see that up close. So now I'm going to use my Pitt Artist pen. This is the 0.1 millimeter pen. This is a permanent black pen. And I'm just going to make, I like to make like a dash and a couple dots. You could just do a simple stitch pattern. And I went all the way around all four sides with that. And I just do it freehand, but you could certainly use a ruler if you find that easier to use. Now I'm going to grab the word birthday. I've got my Hero Hues Unicorn Pigment ink. And I've also got my Ranger Superfine Detail White Embossing Powder. So I'm going to stamp the word birthday on a little piece of black cardstock that I've already cut down to size. And then I'll go ahead and quickly add some embossing powder to this. I'm just tapping away any excess there. And then I'll heat set that as well. I did decide to add a little bit of that unicorn pigment ink right around the edges, and I'm just using a foam applicator tool to do that. Now I've got my black Soot Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to go around those edges again. I wanted to add a little bit of a dark shadow right around the edges. Now with some Scotch foam mounting tape, I'm going to pop up this entire panel, and I just added quite a few chunks of that all the way around the back just to make sure it stays up nicely. And I'll center that on the front of my card. And then I can add that little birthday sentiment. Again, I'm popping that up. I just had some little strips of foam tape left there, so I'm just adding plenty of that on the back. And then this could go in a variety of different places, but I did decide to place it right here beneath the happy. And I'll add a few gems. These are the Buttons Galore and More. This is the Sea Level collection. And going back to my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, and I'm using my Marvy jewel picker to pick up these little jewels, I'm just going to add 3 little gems there. So let's take a closer look at the finished cards, and you can see this beautiful stencil pattern that runs across this entire panel and all the little embellishments we have here. I just love this stencil. And then the second card is the same color combination, but with a different background. I think it just looks totally different. So we've got this beautiful wood grain panel and then our gorgeous stenciling. And that really thick embossed happy. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to visit me at pinkwhisperdesigns.com. As always, thank you so much. And also hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss a single video. So again, thank you for joining me today and have a great day. Bye-bye.